Podcasting has been one of the most important ways for me to grow my business this year. And in this video, I'm going to share why you should have a podcast to promote your business, the key things that you need to keep in mind when starting a podcast, and then at the end of the video, we will be going through the tech stack that I have and sharing step-by-step my whole process so you have everything you need to start a podcast for your own business this year. Let's talk about some of the benefits of podcasting for your brand. There are 3 key reasons why you should be podcasting to promote yourself. Let's get into some of the benefits of podcasting to promote your brand. The first one is that it's a great way to build authority. When you are sitting down and having a conversation with your prospects one-on-one, you are the authority on your subject. And just like in a one-to-one conversation, a podcast is a really great way to be able to promote your value to your audience and therefore build relationships with your prospective customers. The second reason is that podcasting is a great way to have a longer, in-depth conversation with your prospects. We live in a world of short form where YouTube Shorts, Instagram Reels, TikTok really dominates marketing conversations these days, and it's very rare for you to be able to have the opportunity to sit down and explain your value one-on-one. Even this YouTube video is highly produced and edited to be able to share value with you in the quickest way possible. With a podcast, it's understood that you are committing a certain amount of time to expanding your knowledge, and the pace doesn't have to be so quick. You can go more in-depth on your topics. And the third benefit is a little bit more of a fringe benefit, but that is the knowledge that you get when interviewing guest experts. As the person who is putting on the podcast, it's likely that you are part of the community that you are trying to reach through your podcast, be it life coaching, people who are interested in health and wellness, or people who are interested in true crime. By speaking to guest experts on the podcast, you are able to grow your own knowledge as well as share that knowledge with your audience. And as the person interviewing the guest experts, you have control over that conversation. So if you're interested in digging deeper on a topic, you have the ability to do so. Learning from guest experts on my podcast has been so immensely valuable to me, and it is one of the greatest reasons why I always recommend as a business owner, you should have a podcast. Let's talk about some tips and things to keep in mind when starting your podcast. My first tip is to keep episodes under 20 minutes. It's likely that you know what a TED Talk is, and there's a scientific reason why TED Talks are kept at about that 20-minute mark. And that's that after about 20 minutes, attention spans really wane. And so even though you're having a great conversation, somebody isn't going to be able to take in as much information after that 20-minute mark as they were in the beginning of your episode. If you're interviewing a guest or you want to go really in-depth onto a topic, I recommend splitting it up into 2 20-minute episodes or 3 if you really need to make sure that people are able to pay attention and listen to what you have to share. The second is to keep a regular posting schedule. Just like on YouTube or on socials, it's important to remain consistent, and the same is true for a podcast. If you're consistently showing up every week or 2 times a week, you are continuing to build that trust with the people who are in your audience, and your authority continues to grow. And my third tip is to blend solo and guest episodes in your posting schedule. For me, I post twice a week currently. One is a guest interview and the other is a solo show. By using both formats, I'm really able to get the best of both worlds. I'm able to share more about my process and expand my authority, but I'm also able to benefit from interviewing guest experts and learn from them in real time along with my audience. And the next tip that I have is to make sure that your guest knows the entire process from start to finish. We'll go through this a little bit in my workflow, but I wanted to call it out here as well. If you have a really well explained process, send over your guest questions ahead of time and make sure to address any questions that your guest has before you start recording your interview. Things will be super seamless and you are setting them up for success. When you set your guests up for success, you ensure that they come ready to bring the highest value possible to your audience and produce great content alongside you. Now let's hop over to the computer and I will go through my entire process from start to finish, including the tech that I use and how I ensure that all of my podcast episodes are distributed on all major platforms with one simple upload. I'm going to share with you my entire podcast workflow from start to finish. My workflow always begins in ClickUp. ClickUp is where I plan all of my content, prep everything, and not only that, but we manage all of the tasks for our content out of ClickUp as well. So let's go ahead and go to our calendar. This is where I plan all of my episodes and start mapping out how things are going to look. We have an interview tomorrow with Mitch Carson, so we're going to go ahead and find him on the schedule. So we have this group of people here. This is sort of how I've mapped at the end of my content. I kind of slot everyone in preliminary and then go ahead and adjust as needed because reschedules, things like that. So now we've got Mitch Carson slotted in on November 26th. And the next thing I do is prepare questions for the guest episode. I'm going to go ahead and create a doc, and I can do that by using the /doc. I click here to populate with a template, and then I go ahead and use my guest questions template. So then I delete the blank page that I made, and I go ahead and create the document. Now, this document is something that I send to the guest, so I make sure that everything is super buttoned up. Everything else the guest doesn't have access to, so I don't need to be as clean with it. I go ahead and just put their name here and here. That's a cue for me. And then I go ahead and use their bio. Now, depending on how I booked the guest, I have the bio stored in different places. And this brings us to the next piece of software or tech that I use, and that is Podmatch. Podmatch is how I get most of my guest bookings. I love using Podmatch because people pitch me and then I get to choose who the best fit is for our audience. And I know that Mitch came in as a guest booking through Podmatch, so I'm going to go ahead and find his profile here. This is the great thing about Podmatch is all of the guests have profiles along with their bios and headshots, so everything's in one place. I will show you what I use if I am not booking through Podmatch. Sometimes I find people on Threads or on LinkedIn who would be a really great fit, and I send them to my external, which just means outside of Podmatch booking link. It has a sort of bit about the podcast, what guest needs to know, and who our audience is. When they select a time, this is where I get their email for me to send the questions to, the topic that they want to cover, their bio, link for their headshot. I also ask for a mailing address because I like to send a copy of my book. Because Mitch came through podcast, I know that I said which topic I liked, so I'm going to go ahead and go through to his messages, changing perceived value. I'm going to see if he had a topic or if I just pulled that from somewhere on his bio. So because Mitch doesn't have that topic on his bio any longer, I'm going to go ahead and use what I have in the message. Sometimes guests have a really nicely packaged up topic that I'm able to use as the basis of the episode, but we're going to go ahead and just pull changing perceived value for now, and we will go ahead and make this a little bit more zesty when it comes to posting the actual episode. And Mitch's tag is get interviewed guaranteed on Matromedia. So changing perceived value with PR. And then I take the topic and I put it later on in my template as well. And I do this because I want to get into the meat and potatoes of the episode as quickly as possible. I don't have a long intro. I say, welcome to the Growth Pod. Today on the podcast, we are interviewing guest name. And then I go into their bio and I say, welcome to the podcast. And then after they say, thanks for having me, I say, today you're going to share topic. And I'm so excited about that. And then I go ahead and get started on the first question. So let's go ahead now and grab Mitch's bio. On Podmatch, the bios are here. Otherwise, I will go ahead and find it on the calendar invite if they booked externally. And I go ahead and put it here. Now, a lot of times, guest bios, probably mine included, are too long for the intro. I want to make sure that we get into the concept of the episode as quickly as possible. So at this point, I pare down the bio, one, to make sure that we're shedding the best light on the guest as possible, but two, making sure that we're getting into the episode. So here we are. I have now reduced the length of the bio quite a bit, maybe in about half. And this makes sure that we're respecting our audience's time while still setting the guest up in the best light. I use a lot of what's included in their original bio. I try to just make sure that we're focusing it not only on the concept of the episode, but making sure that the audience is going to pick up on all of the importance of things in their bio. Now that we have the bio out of the way, we're going to go ahead and create some questions. The first question is the one here. I have this in the intro because it's really what I use to tee up the conversation. The topic is changing perceived value with PR. So what I do now is think about what information people need to orient themselves to the conversation we're about to have. I never want to assume that somebody is super into marketing and is very literate with business topics, but I also don't want to be too elementary with what we're discussing. So changing perceived value with PR, I want to maybe focus on why perceived value is important and if it's actually able to even be changed to begin with. So let's go ahead and say, before we get started, can you share why it's important? And does this matter in business? So I will tee up the guest. Before we get started, can you share why it's important to care about perceived value? And does it even matter in our business to begin with? So the purpose of this question not only is to orient someone to the conversation we're about to have, but give the guest opportunity to provide even more credibility. Of course, we go over the bio and all of the credibility that the guest has already provided, but this is where they're able to hook the audience, share about why they should care and why it matters. Then we'll move into the main topic of discussion. So we'll go ahead and move back to Podmatch. One of the nice things about Podmatch is there are questions that the guest is ready to answer. So I always start here with a quick scan to make sure that I'm thinking about the conversation in the best way possible. I will say that a lot of the questions on Podmatch are to tee up the guest to pitch their products or services, which is fine. A lot of these I take with a grain of salt and make sure that they are actually providing value to our conversation. How to use media appearances to boost credibility and visibility. This seems kind of good, so I'm going to put that there and we can come back to it later. I'm going to go ahead and also have this as a bonus question. Now we'll go ahead and get into the main topic of discussion. For about a 10-minute discussion, I prep about 5 questions. Some guests go through that in about 12 minutes, and then our close only takes about a few minutes. And so if somebody is very concise, quick to answer the questions, but still provide enough value where I don't need to dig in too much, their episodes run more like 16 minutes, and I'm okay with that. Okay, so now we have all of the questions for the main topic of discussion. And as I was going through, I'm thinking about how I want the episode to progress. So I'm trying to create questions that build upon the knowledge that the guest will be sharing earlier on in the episode. In addition to that, I rephrased this bonus question here just so it would make a little bit more sense given the context of what we may be talking about. Extra questions are something that I don't always have prepared, but in this case, it didn't add any extra lift really for me to be able to have those in our back pocket. Now I'm ready to share this with the guests, so I'm going to go ahead and click share, and then on ClickUp, I create a public link. And when somebody views this link, and so I'll show you what that looks like. Here we are. It looks super clean. You can see that there's not really much they can do. They can, of course, duplicate it or download it, which isn't a big deal to me, but this is what the guest sees. So now we're going to go ahead and send these questions to the guest. I have a template that I have prepared for this. You can see here. And so we know that this is Mitch. And I go ahead and link it here. And then I always click on the link to make sure that it populated correctly and that I didn't have some other link saved that I accidentally linked. I live in constant fear that my emails that I send out are not what I intend for no reason. I also wanted to mention that I am using a tool to save templates, which you can see here. It's a free plugin called Streak. Streak is essentially a CRM for Gmail. So if you are in sales and you wanted to manage all of your pipeline out of Gmail, this is for you and you can use the paid plan. But for me, I use the free plan because I only really need it for these email templates. After that, I'll go ahead and put in the guest's email. For privacy, I'm not going to do that on camera, but I will do that and then send it to the guest. After we have the guest questions sent, it is time to record. When it comes to recording, I do everything in Riverside. I think it is such a seamless tool, and it's great for the guest experience as well because they don't need to download anything. They can effectively click a link in the calendar invite and then jump into the studio. Riverside is also pretty affordable. I pay monthly $29 for the Pro plan. I like this because it has the Magic Clips features that I love for social clips. So when you are in Riverside as a host or a producer, it looks like this, and you can just click Go to Studio. I don't know if this is going to let me screen record and jump into the studio at the same time, but let's try it. You have the option here to change your camera input. I am using the Anchor Power Conference, just a webcam that I got on Amazon. And for a microphone, I use the Shure SM7B Plus that I plug into a knockoff Rodecaster. So you can see here it's the Manocaster G1 Neo. I like it. It's pretty easy to use. If you want to pick one up on Amazon, it will be linked in the description along with with everything that I'm mentioning. But the other thing that's key is using headphones. And I like wired headphones because I can hear exactly how I sound in the mic in real time. There's no delay. I know some people like to use AirPods, but you just need to make sure that whatever it is, you are able to hear what you sound like. There is no delay and that your audio quality sounds good. I highly, highly, highly recommend making sure that your audio sounds great when you're starting a podcast. I'm going to click I'm using headphones because I am, and then I'm going to join Studio. When you're in the studio, it looks like this. You can copy and email the link to the guest, but I have a standing studio link that I share in the calendar invite. The other thing that I wanted to point out in Riverside is that there's some echo cancellation features. You can go ahead and switch your cam on and off. You can share your screen and you can prepare a script. If you have a solo episode prepared and you want to have your notes on screen, you can do that here. I don't mind just having it up next to what I'm doing and referring to it because I don't do my solo episodes on camera. And so I'm able to pretty much just refer when I need to without needing to worry about looking into the camera. So once you're done recording a guest episode, you need to edit it. I highly recommend editing it, not only because it takes the weight off your shoulders of getting everything right the first time, but it helps you provide the most value to your audience and it puts your guest in the best light. So it's really a win-win-win. When we edit, I don't edit my podcast. My husband is our head of content. He manages that entire workflow, but it's really straightforward. You go ahead and download the video. Riverside records separate audio tracks, so your audio and the guest's audio are recorded locally and then uploaded to the cloud. This way, if there's any issues with the internet, you don't need to worry. The final product is super seamless, and it also does the same for video. So what you'll do is go ahead and download it and then add it into your editing software. We edit in Premiere Pro. If you are new to editing, I recommend something like CapCut. It's very user-friendly, and if you're already making other social assets, it's likely that you've used something like CapCut before, and generally that's good enough to get started, and later on you can invest in a professional editor. Here is also where you will do the magic clips. I'm not going to do it now because this is what our editor does, but you essentially just click generate clips. It goes ahead with one click of the button. You can see here that it generates quite a few clips, and then you are able to add captions and style things how you'd like. So one of the great things about Riverside is you can quickly generate social clips, but you can also change how they look. So we like to use this grid layout, which is stacked on top of each other, but you can also do a full screen layout where it's full screen on the speaker. You can do a picture in picture, which is where whoever's speaking will be big and then the other person will be small sort of on the bottom. And then there's also the split screen. You can see how it sort of switches to whoever is speaking. The other thing you can do is edit these captions. So we like to use an outline and then change the font. You can change it to whatever you want. And then you can change the size. You can say if you want it in one line or more. And then you can also change the color of the text, the case, and then you can choose your animation. The other thing you can do is change the color of the main text as well as what the highlight is. So if I change that to bright green, now you can see that instead of that purple color, it's bright green. You can also add custom brand colors. So there are two options that I've used to host my podcast. The first one, and this is where I got started out, was Buzzsprout. I highly recommend paying for something like Buzzsprout or what I'm on now, which is Captivate, because you can upload once and push your podcast out to a bunch of different players. That way, not only are you on Spotify, but you're on Apple Podcasts, you're on Amazon Music for their podcasts, and you have just expanded reach with no extra effort on your part. I highly, highly recommend it. For pricing, Buzzsprout is a little bit more beginner friendly. You can see here that there's actually a free plan where you can upload 2 hours of content each month. However, I pretty much immediately started paying for the $12 a month plan because you are able to create your own website with your own URL. The reason that I switched from Buzzsprout to Captivate is because I didn't love the look of that podcast player. And I'll show you what I mean. When I go to growthpod.fm, which is the web address for my podcast, you can see here that I have all of the episodes here. I have links to players. I have my bio, and this is all hosted in Captivate. Buzzsprout had a similar feature, but I just didn't love the layout. I didn't think it looked very clean, and the customization features, while they're still lacking on Captivate, they just didn't wow allow me on Buzzsprout either. So from that, I think you can guess that I am now hosting in Captivate. For pricing, Captivate is a little bit more expensive than Buzzsprout, but I definitely think it's worth it when you consider the features. I'm currently on this $19 a month plan. I pay monthly. The way Captivate charges is really the amount of downloads that you're having per month. So if you have more than 300,000 downloads per month, you're paying $99 a month. Otherwise, you're paying $19 or $49 a month. And of course, they have the yearly plan as well, so you can save a little bit there. Let's hop into Captivate and I'll show you what it looks like to publish a new episode. So it's really easy. You're going to go ahead and drag your episode here. Actually, I don't have one to upload, but you add your title, you add your show notes, and I love my templates. I've mentioned it several times. I have a standard show notes template here. And in this template, I follow a really cookie cutter formula. I have some sort of hook to the episode, and then I entice with like a paragraph, specifically guest shares. And then I share kind of like the 3 big takeaways that they have in the episode. And then I can bold to call things out. I know I pull out all the copywriting stops on this essentially. Mentioned in this episode is where I add the links. I link here to anything that the guest mentions during their episodes. If it's books, resources that they have, things that they've seen and they've liked, I try to find everything and link it here. So if you're listening to an episode and you really want to refer back to that resource, it's usually here if I can find it. And the other thing I link here is any special offers that guests have and where they want guests to follow up with them if they're interested in taking that next step or finding out more information. Finally, I end with a bio. So I will post the guest's long bio here, not the one I edited. And that's because the guest provided me the bio. For me, if somebody is reading the bio here, they want all the information about the guest. They're not worried about tell me about the guest and why I should believe them and then get right into the episode. We have more time here to share. So sometimes guests have really long bios. I put everything here. After that, I have an outro and also my affiliate disclaimer. You can see here, these are like content blocks that I'm able to create in Captivate that auto-populate. And this way, if I ever need to update my affiliate disclaimer or my outro contains my bio, for example, it's updated across all episodes with one click. We're all about doing more with less. And so I love that that auto-populates. The other thing you can do here is add chapters or dynamic content. The dynamic content is where I will add post-roll ads. So for example, I'm currently running a post-roll ad where listeners can get a free copy of my book. All of the information is in the ad, and then that's auto-populated into the description. Captivate makes it super easy. These are features that I don't use very much. I will be uploading my audiobook as a bonus episode, for example, and we will be producing a trailer, but all of my other episodes are normal. The other thing I wanted to point out is that you can update the episode slug, which I do for every episode. But the reason this is important is because whatever you title your episode, Captivate will populate that as the slug. Essentially, it would look like this, which is an insane URL. And so usually I'll just shorten this to something short and sweet, like changing perceived value, something that's still SEO friendly, but not as nightmarish as what is auto-populated. The other thing you can do is upload episode artwork. And so I do this for every episode. Our episode artwork is going to actually be getting a refresh within the next few weeks, but currently we create all of our artwork for the episodes in Canva. This is the standard episode artwork. And if you find my podcast, this will also be getting a refresh. But at the time of this recording, if you find my podcast on directories, this is what the artwork will be. The other thing we do is create guest specific artwork. I will go ahead and download the guest headshot, put it in here in the template, and then you're able to set specific artwork for that episode here in Captivate. So hopping over to Spotify, we can really see how this looks. You can see here that this is my main podcast art, and on solo episodes, my podcast art is used by default. I do not need to upload this into Captivate if this is what I want. And so if you are only doing solo shows, or if you don't want to create guest specific art, that is fine. You don't need to do so. But if you are trying to showcase the guest, you can upload the custom thumbnail in Captivate and it will automatically upload to that episode. And finally, you're also able to embed a video in your website. So if we go to Karen's episode, you can see what this looks like in practice. Here is the audio player. You can see that, this is just the audio version, but we also film a video version. And because we have embedded it here, not only is the video on our YouTube channel, but when I direct people to our website to listen to the podcast, it is here for them as well. Here is the show notes. You can see what everything looks like live. Here we talked about the bio and how I put that in. And then the template begins here. You can see I have my email list sign up, connect with me on LinkedIn, my website for consulting. And then here is that post-roll ad that we're currently running and the transcript from that. Once an episode is live, our work is not done. We still need to share all of the information and the assets with the guest. So I, again, have a template for this, and you can see here one that I shared with Karen since her episode went live today and will be published on all directories within 24 hours. Usually it's much quicker than this. However, some directories could hold out to that 24-hour mark. So I always just like to be upfront with the fact that it could take a little bit of time before you see it on directories. But again, this episode went live today and we just saw that it's already live in Spotify. I include a link to the episode, which links to my podcast website that we were just looking at. And then I also include an asset folder, which includes the podcast cover. Some guests like to share the podcast cover when they share their episode. Others like to share the social asset that we create. Again, the assets are created in Riverside. It's very straightforward to be able to generate social clips, but it's so simple. I think you've got it figured out. Thank you so much for watching this episode. If you have a podcast or you are starting one, please link it down in the description so we can all learn from what you have to share.